been sending out these things every week, these like freebies, sometimes I call them cheat sheets, where they're just sort of like little like things to know from somebody who specializes in MSPs and works sort of in a CFO or in a tax capacity with a lot of MSPs. So in this week, what I did is I actually came up with the three profit killers that I think I've seen the most in either clients I've consulted with or in the MSP space specifically. So what I wanted to do was just kind of go through those. So the first one I see is expense creep. So, and I'm not going to read this word for word. I'll just kind of paraphrase it. I don't expect this to go longer than 10 or 15 minutes. Actually, let me go ahead and do this here. Let me put my phone on silent and I'll do this. So, the first I had a client probably several years ago, and he was in the home service industry, and it was really interesting because when he first engaged our services, what we found is he was probably doing about $2 million in top line revenue. His his total compensation of that 2 million might have been around 100 to 150, which if you do the math, $100,000 on 2 million is going to be 5%. So he was probably somewhere between 5 and 10% total comp profit, we could say, when compared against top line revenue. So he had a team. He had probably 10 plus team members. Naturally, when you have a team of 10 plus people, there's a lot of people management and kind of a lot of headaches. And so what we did is as we worked with him over the years, what he started to discover is a lot of his team wasn't really necessary. In fact, they were causing a lot more friction than they were actually contributing to either the growth of the business or, helping satisfy clients in the home service industry. So it was just uh, as these employees cycled out of the business, he didn't replace them. And over the course of several years, his team shrunk from probably 10 to 12 employees down to 3 to 5. And what's so interesting is his margins went from 5% to probably about 20%, his profit margins, that is. Whereas his top line revenue in that same time went from about 2 million up to about $1 million. So I want to show you here. If you look down here, you can see this example. Before, when he first engaged us, he was doing about $100,000 in net income. He had 10 employees. He didn't absolutely love them. There were kind of a lot of headaches. After several years of sort of working on his operations and watching his profit margins and really trying to lean up, and as people cycled out, his margins got better. He went on to do about $1 million in net income. He only had a handful of rock star employees, and he had basically no headaches. This business was just a well-oiled machine. So the number one thing I would say that I see businesses that the trap they fall into is as they grow, they feel the need to they feel the need to spend more money, which there's all sort of discussions we could have about that, but um, the, I get the question all the time. Whenever I meet with a prospect, one of the things they say most is they say, "Can you help me reduce my expenses?" I actually have it written right here. They say, "If you're going to be my CFO, can you help me reduce expenses?" The problem is number one, there are no hidden expenses. A lot of business owners, they think, maybe there's some money that's just kind of falling through the cracks somewhere. It's not really the case. It all gets caught in the bank account, and unless you haven't looked at the bank statements in 2 years, chances are you would have seen something that you either don't need or don't use or whatever, and you would have gotten rid of it. So the idea that we're going to find thousands of dollars in waste isn't true. So when they ask the question of can you help me reduce my expenses? Yes, but only through austerity measures. I mean, you're talking about firing staff, which is typically not recommended, or trying to find some other kind of tech stack inside of your company. But I already work in the MSP space. You guys are pretty good at tech stacks. So typically, I would say if we are really trying to watch profit margin, our goal should not be how do we cut expenses today? Our goal should be how do we grow and then throttle our expenses. That's really the key. And that's how the most efficient businesses grow is they are excellent at watching and managing their expenses as they grow. If you want me to send this out, I'll send this out in my email campaign to everyone. If you're not on that, go ahead and just reach out to me and I'll email it to you. But there are a lot of questions you can ask yourself as you're growing that'll help you understand if an expense is worth the time. So it might be like, what's the opportunity cost if I don't spend this money? Can we do it cheaper or differently, or does it align with our strategic priorities? So I would say the number one profit killer of all MSPs is they grow and those expenses just increase. Actually, I just met with a client this week who he is expecting to probably do 50 to 100% more. So his business could potentially double in the next year. He's an MSP business. And I brought this up to him and I said, we are going to be watching your expenses next year because if you double your top line revenue, which is high, he expects maybe 50% to 100%. But if he doubles his top line revenue, as long as we can manage those expenses properly, he could easily double his take home. So absolutely crucial. You have to make sure you're monitoring those expenses. Okay, number two is bad clients. So I had a client who I worked with. Long story short, when he brought me on, they mentioned in the interview meeting, they said we have a lot of clients that we just don't like. And I brought up that we could do a profitability analysis, and they kind of latched onto that. They said, you know what, we would actually love that. Let's really quantify which of our clients are worth our time and which ones aren't. So we ran this client profitability analysis, which to help you understand, you already know how profitable your clients are because you know, depending on how you charge your clients, you might know what the all-in seat price is for them. You probably know what your cost of goods are for them and how much you're billing them. So you have a rough idea of how profitable they are. But the problem is those are all just financial metrics. They don't actually measure um, value to you as a human being. So for example, some of these clients, when I met with this client in this, first meeting, one of the things they said is we have clients who their secretary will keep us on the phone all day if we let them because she just loves to ask questions and they don't really know if she's trying to juice them as this service that they provide and they feel like, well, they're charging us monthly, we might as well try to juice them for all they have. Or maybe it wasn't so intentional and whatever the reason, they have this client who just takes so much time. So what we did is we actually put together a scatter plot, if you know what a scatter plot is. And on one side we had I have to think about what it was, but we had what the dollar value is that you bill them, and then on the other axis we had how many hours do you spend per month invested in this client? And you could very clearly see on this scatter plot all the clients that were, depending on how it was set up, I don't remember. All of the clients that were up in this corner, these are your golden clients. All of the clients that were over here in this corner or in this corner, these are the clients that take up all your time and you're not making nearly enough money. And it's really a ratio when you compare those two. What are your billings against the amount of headaches that they give you? And so what we found in this analysis is the good clients for this client of mine, after we ran this analysis, were worth 3 to 4 times as much on a per hour basis. So to give you specific numbers to chew on, if you were if you're billing someone, let's say your gross profit on a client is $1,000 a month and they take you 20 hours a month, that would be about $50 an hour. What we found is that his good clients were running at about $200 per hour, $150 to $200 per hour, compared to the $50 per hour. So 200 into 1,000, that means you're only spending 5 hours a month compared to 20. So the question I pose to my clients whenever I meet with them and I go through this exercise is, hmm, I had a question somewhere. Maybe I don't have it on here. Oh yeah, here it is. Would you be willing to trade, and these numbers may not be perfect, but would you be willing to trade 20% of your income for 80% less headaches, time, or frustration? And typically, most business owners, unless they are right on the cusp of, losing their house, most of them would say, absolutely, I'll take that trade every day. And here's the other thing to think about. If you're spending all of your time on bad clients, then it takes up from actually meeting or hunting down new good clients. And so over a long enough time frame, actually in the long run, it actually hurts you holding on to those businesses because now it's inhibiting growth. So I see this all the time. When I was thinking of what are the three biggest profit killers, number one, it's expense creep. Number two is bad clients. Just get rid of the bad clients. It may hit your bottom line in the short term, but in the long run, it will be so much better for your business. And even I practice this in my own business. I offload bad clients, not often, but on occasion when I find that this is happening, it's not worth it. So let's move on to number three. So this one is pretty big in the MSP space. I have a client who he hired a marketing guy. And this happens with every business, because the number one issue every business faces is how do I get more clients? So then they inevitably hire a marketing person. The marketing person doesn't generate any leads or whatever, doesn't close, and then they end up firing the person, and now they're out of pocket. Okay, so I have a client that this happened. He hired this guy, and he had him for I think about a year, maybe even longer. And he was not cheap. This guy was several thousand dollars a month, many several thousand dollars a month to do the marketing. And he did everything. He was posting on social media and fielding leads and doing all the networking and everything. The problem was it actually didn't generate any deals. Nothing closed from this guy, and nothing against the guy. It just didn't work out. After a year, you think if he was paying him, let's say $4,000 a month, that's 48 a year, basically 50. To be out of pocket $50,000 a year is quite a bit. So this is something we see with MSPs all the time because MSPs naturally are trying to hire a lot, um, and or they're trying to generate new leads rather. A lot of times too, MSPs, they bring on someone like a VCIO or some other position that they think is going to be helpful. They're thinking about, help desks and tickets and things like that. They want support. So the three critical questions, and I'm going to wrap this up here. There are, well, here I have four, but you want to ask yourself, what's the ROI of this role? Will it help me free up my time to do more of that high ticket work? And that kind of comes back to having bad clients. Can I structure their pay for results? So if you can structure someone's pay for results, what that means is they aren't going to be paid on a salary or any sort of monthly retainer basis. Rather, they're going to be paid hourly or according to commission. So big fan of that structure. Number three is this a people problem or a process problem? If it's something like support desk, it's probably a people problem and you want someone there who can really help your clients. But if it's something that could be systematized, we want that before we want to hire someone. And the obvious reason is number one, hiring people is going to be more expensive. But number two, hiring people comes with all kinds of administrative burdens. So be very careful of that. And then number four, I have how will this affect my margin of safety? If you need a video on that, I have a video, reach out to me and I'll send you the link. I think it's on my LinkedIn page as well as YouTube maybe. So anyway, that's it for this week, you guys. I will see you next week. Next week, I think we're going to talk about setting goals for MSPs. So, all right. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you. And we'll see you next week.